Welcome back to the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. I'm joined by Dave Shaffer.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. I'm David Shaffer. I'm the chair of the Family Wealth and Estate Planning Group at Woods Oviatt Gilman here in Rochester.
Sounds pretty prestigious.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good gig.
Yeah?
Good gig.
All right, we'll start with that. How did you get into practicing law? What made you...
Yeah, great question. When my kids actually asked me this the other day. When I was 12, 13 years old, I wanted to be a sports writer. So I love sports, big Bills fan. And over time, I realized if I devoted my job to sports, I may lose my love and passion for sports. So I decided sports writing wasn't for me. I did liberal arts education in college. And after college, really wasn't sure. Thought maybe the legal field was for me. Worked at a law firm, decided that was for me. And went to law school at UB and spent my 3 years there and started with the firm I'm at now and have been my entire legal career, Woods Oviatt.
Okay, so you're not where you thought you'd be when you were 13, but it worked out.
I'm not traveling to Buffalo Bills games in the media room. I'm traveling to Buffalo Bills games as a fan.
That's fun.
It's the best way.
I've been to a lot of Bills games. So actually, this is the first year, I think, since I can remember that I have not been to a Bills game yet. I did season tickets for about 5 years. Since getting rid of the season tickets, I still go to 2 or 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to some road games, which I know I've talked to you about. But this year, I have not been to a game yet.
What I'll say, Alex, is I think the listeners and viewers here are going to need your help in saving money for the new stadium tickets with
That's
the
probably
PSLs.
Right. Yeah, that's right. 2 years from now, I won't be able to afford to go. So I'll probably go while I still can.
That's true. That's true.
Very cool. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the Buffalo Bills, although maybe we can do a different podcast about that. Today, we're here to talk about everything related to estate planning.
Sure.
So our professions overlap a little bit, and then I have a lot of clients that ask me questions about their estate plan. And I'll go through what some of those questions are. But before we do that, I guess, how do you define estate planning and what can people think about in terms of that?
Sure. I'm sure the Webster Dictionary definition is something like the accumulation, preservation, and distribution of assets. But I always break it down to people. Estate planning, it can be more than this, but at its core, a will, last will and testament, which covers what happens on death, power of attorney, which is a legal document that says if you're alive but need help with financial matters and paying bills and things like that because maybe you're sick, power of attorney document's important, and a healthcare proxy. Who's going to make a healthcare decision for you if you cannot make it for yourself? Of course, in the profession you're in, beneficiary designations are a big part of that too, making sure that your accounts have the right beneficiaries associated with them because those accounts dictate what will happen with those assets at death. So that's been a nutshell. When people think about estate plan, it's a little misleading. Estate implies I have $500 million. Everybody should have an estate plan, even if it's basic.
That's what I was going to ask you. I think a lot of people hear the term estate plan. They think, you just said it's for the ultra wealthy. It's not for me. So to break it down even, does everybody need an estate plan? Should every adult in America have an estate plan set up, or is it only something that comes into play?
Ideally. So I'll give you an example, Alex. From time to time, I'll have a client or friend call and say, hey, my kid just turned 18. They're going off to college. What now? Do they need all these documents that you helped me do? Mm-hmm. This is the parent speaking, right? And I'm saying certainly a healthcare proxy, right? If you go off to college and something happens medically, you're 18. So technically you're on your own. But what if you need someone else to step in and make a decision for you? You're in some accident on campus, you go to the medical facility, and who has legal authority to help with those decisions? It'd be nice to have a very concise legal document that spells that out. Mm-hmm. So healthcare proxy, yes, and even power of attorney. There might be a bank account that you gave Junior with $1,000 in it for the fall semester in Junior's name, but if Junior's sick and can't deal with the money, or maybe Junior's fully healthy, but you want to keep an eye on the account, you have to have the legal authority to be able to do that as power of attorney. So those are the two things that are almost no-brainers for everyone. The will, I would say most people, yes, need a will. Mm-hmm. For the situation I just described where you have an 18-year-old, you may not have accumulated very much money. My example where you have $800 or $1,000 in the bank account, do you really need a will for that? Well, if that's the only thing you own,
probably not.
Right. But as you accumulate assets, a house, Bank accounts. A house is a big one because unlike most financial assets where you can put a beneficiary on it, you can't really do that with a house. So once you own a house, that's a marker that you should do some planning. And obviously, the more wealth you accumulate, the more incentive there is to do a will.
Sure. So like we paint a picture of a typical, we'll say young professional that probably isn't thinking about a will yet. Let's say they're 30-something years old, they own a house, they have a pretty good income. Maybe they've got $250,000 in investable assets and 401k plans, different things like that. If they don't have kids or they're not married, they're probably not thinking about a will.
Yeah.
Maybe they should be, but they're probably not thinking about a will. So what happens if that person gets hit by that bus? God forbid, something happens. Now the state steps in and...
Yeah. So in your example, if it's an unmarried, let's say it's a couple, but they're not married. In New York State, there's no such thing as common law marriage. So you're either married or you're not. So even if you've been living together 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, if you die without a will, New York State does not, some people think it's a misnomer. Some people think New York State takes your money. That's not true. But what they do is they essentially make a will for you based on your family tree. Your longtime partner of 10, 15, 20 years doesn't fall into that family tree. So then what ends up happening is they look at who's alive. Okay, so for someone who's, let's say they're 40 years old, not married, no kids, die without a will. First thing is, if they have an IRA or 401k or life insurance, chances are they have a beneficiary listed on those accounts. Those are non-probate assets that do not pass through the will. So those are probably okay, assuming the person's actually filled out the beneficiary form. But for the house, in your example, if I own the house and I'm the person that's unmarried, no kids, where does the house go? It will likely go to my parents. And for some people, that's not a terrible end result.
Right.
But the older I get, the older my parents get, and then it brings into the idea of what if their health starts to fail? And what if they need long-term care? And gosh, what if they need long-term nursing home care? And then that opens up the whole discussion about Medicaid planning and asset protection and all that good stuff. Do I want to be leaving money to somebody who's 30 or 40 years older than me? That money may end up going to a skilled nursing facility. And nothing against skilled nursing facilities, but most people, that's not their estate plan to leave money to a skilled nursing facility. Really, that to me is problematic in not having a will, because that could happen. Or if you have parents and maybe you're estranged from one of the parents, doesn't matter. There's no definition under New York law. Your parents are entitled to the money if you die without a will, if they're not estranged from you. There's no such thing, right? Another example that's probably more pressing, paints a picture for people is, what if you are a married couple and you have 2 young kids and you pass away without a will? So again, we're going based on what New York law says. New York law has a pecking order. Unfortunately, what it says is your spouse is entitled to the first $50,000, plus 1/2 of the rest of the estate. The other half goes to your kids. Now, if you ask most people, hey, if you pass away and your spouse is alive and you have young kids, where would you want your money to go? They'd say to my spouse, and then when both of us are gone, to the kids. New York law does not say that if you pass away without a will. And again, there's some assets that doesn't apply to, because if you have an IRA or life insurance, if you've put your spouse down as the beneficiary, that controls what happens to that asset. But for assets like a house or a bank account that might be in your name alone, you're going to have a real headache on your hands, because your 8-year-old child is going to be inheriting half of the money and your spouse is going to be inheriting the other half.
Yeah, I can't imagine what I would have done if I was 8 years old and inherited any significant sum of money. So that's a scary picture to paint. And I think you touched on something that's maybe one of the biggest questions we got. You talked about, when does Medicaid step in terms of supporting somebody in a long-term care situation? And I do seminars. I, of course, meet with clients one-on-one. I do webinars, do all kinds of different events. And the number one question I get around estate planning is always something paraphrased along the terms of, how do I keep the nursing home from taking all my money? And they all say it differently, but that's the general preference is, if I can't take care of myself and somebody else has to step in to take care of me physically, I don't want the nursing home, we'll call it in air quotes, taking my house, taking my retirement accounts, taking my bank accounts, or whatever it is. So what is if we separate the myth from the reality around that topic, because a lot of it's just, hearsay, and unfortunately, people get legal and financial advice from their drunk neighbor sometimes.
Right.
So if we get rid of that, what is the actual facts around that situation, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, great question. The two things I hear most often is, how do I keep my money away from the government for tax purposes? And how do I keep my money away from the nursing home?
One's a lot easier than two, I think.
Yeah, great question. Really, it starts out by looking at, number one, what's in place already. The long-term care insurance market has changed a lot in the 17, 18 years I've been in it. And I know in your career, you've seen changes as well. So long-term care insurance is not readily accessible, available, and affordable as it used to be. The partnership policies that we once knew aren't really a thing anymore. So most people, when I pose that question, do you have long-term care insurance? The answer is no. And that's okay. I never pose it to make someone feel bad about that, but it's important to understand what they have and what they don't have. So assuming no long-term care insurance, really it's a question of, what do your assets look like? And what I mean by that is, luckily in New York State, New York gets a bad rap for many different reasons in terms of taxes, but one benefit in New York is, if you're in a nursing home, retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks are looked at in a different way. They are largely protected. In other words, if I have to go into a nursing home and I have $100,000 in my IRA and nothing else, I actually can qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid is the government program that will pay for skilled nursing home care if I don't have a certain level of assets, right? So some people think, well, $100,000 in IRA, doesn't that disqualify you? That's over the $30,000 Medicaid threshold. Normally, yes, except because it's a retirement account in New York, they don't count it as an asset, they count it as income, provided you're taking required minimum distributions from it. So the first thing is to understand the lay of the land in terms of the assets.
So can I cut in there for a
Yeah,
second?
please do.
So
Please, yeah.
you're talking about a $100,000 account,
Yeah.
which in the RMD world, maybe it kicks off like $3,000 or $4,000 a year, so that's not significant.
Right.
If somebody has $2 million in a 401k, now we're talking about, we'll call it $80,000 or so in RMDs per year.
Sure.
That would disqualify them, correct?
It would not disqualify them, but and I know we don't want to get it too far into the weeds, but when you're talking about nursing home and Medicaid qualification, there's assets and there's income.
Okay.
If you qualify from an asset perspective, then you're in the nursing home and Medicaid is helping to pay your bill, but you're contributing your income, which include RMDs. So if your income is high enough, a lot of money is still going to go to the nursing home. Your principal asset, the IRA, is going to be protected, but those RMDs are probably going to be turned over to the nursing home.
So if I look at it as, I've got $2 million in a 401k, I take my RMD of $80,000. Now $80,000 is sitting in my bank account. Doesn't that now qualify as an asset above $30,000?
Oh, it does. If you've already received the RMD, for sure.
So you need
but
to qualify
if
before
if I'm in the nursing home, I've been getting my RMDs, but I've been spending like crazy, and my bank account's now down to 10, 12, 15,000, and now I'm in the nursing home. I apply for Medicaid. They take a snapshot of my assets. They're at 10 or 15,000. I'm under the Medicaid asset threshold. I've qualified for Medicaid, but Medicaid says, okay, you're not going to pay zero. You don't have to pay the full shot at the nursing home anymore of $17,000, $18,000, $20,000 a month, but you have to pay something, and that something is your income, which would be your RMDs prorated on a monthly basis. 80,000 is what, 7,500 a month or 7,000 a month, plus your Social Security, and if you have a pension. So if you have a significant IRA, that income contribution to the nursing home every month, once you're on Medicaid, could be $8,000, $9,000, but it's better than the double that amount if you are paying out of pocket.
I want to ask like a million what if questions. It might derail. So
we might need a part two on this, Alex.
What if question. So what if all of my retirement money is in a Roth account? So if I have a Roth IRA, there's no RMD required.
Yes.
Do they look at that at all?
They count it. The Medicaid rules do not. The tax man and Medicaid rules. They don't talk.
Okay.
So, and I get this question a lot because I know we're not going to delve too far into it, but there's a 5-year look back in terms of, if I have 100,000 in my bank account, but I know the threshold for Medicaid is only 30, can I just give you 70,000 and then apply for Medicaid? In theory, yes, except there's a 5-year look back. That when you apply for Medicaid to pick up the tab for your nursing home bill, they want to see what assets you have, but they want to see what you've been doing with your money for the last 5 years. So if you've been making a gift, they're going to ding you for it. So you can't circumvent the system solely based on gifting. I know we went off on a tangent.
Yeah, that's
there.
okay. Bring it back.
Yeah. So remind me of the original question.
So the original question was about the Roth IRA.
Yes.
So let's say it's not even a 5-year look back. What my entire working career, I just saved into a Roth IRA.
Yes.
I'd never put anything in a 401k. It took off. The investments did great. Now I've got the same $2 million sitting in a Roth IRA.
Yes.
Which for our listeners, there's no RMD required, and any money I take out of it is tax free. Am I in this perfect situation where they're going to look at this and say, you don't have any income, you don't have any assets, it's all in a retirement account.
Too good to be true.
Everything's free. Go on your way. No.
Medicaid will basically say, pretend this was a traditional IRA. Take the RMDs you would have had to take if it was a traditional, and that will be your income.
Got it. These Medicaid guys are smart.
There's planning that you can do, right, to protect assets and plan ahead and be proactive. And actually, even 11th hour planning you can do right before when you're in a nursing home to protect assets. But there's limitations.
Sure.
Someone said, I heard this funny quote, I'm a lawyer, not a magician. So I'm sure you've heard that one with financial advisory too.
No magic wand in financial planning.
Yeah.
Okay, so bring us back to the way original question before I cut you off and start asking those what if questions.
Sure.
That's on me.
Yeah.
We were talking about how to protect your assets from this nursing home. So what are the options? So long-term care insurance is one we talk a lot about. You're right, it barely exists anymore.
Yeah.
Even if you can qualify for it, it's usually not affordable.
Sure.
So the next layer of options is going to talk to somebody like you, and you're going to recommend, in general terms, what kind of
option. A couple thoughts. I'd like to always emphasize the importance of the power of attorney. We talked about that a few minutes ago. And most people think about that. That's more estate planning. That's not quote unquote Medicaid asset protection planning, but they're in sync with one another, because if your health deteriorates and you need some of this higher level asset protection planning, chances are you may not be able to do that planning yourself, or you may participate in it, but if your health isn't great, you're relying on your trusted loved ones to step in and really speak on your behalf and help you. And you have to have a legal document known as a power of attorney to do that. Always, someone who comes in and wants elder law, Medicaid planning advice, the importance of the power of attorney cannot be emphasized enough. So that's number one. Another tool that, again, there's no one size fits all. Some it works for some, others don't like it, is an irrevocable trust. Where, for example, if you're 64 years old, 68 years old, in pretty good health, let's say your house is fully paid up, and you're worried, geez, if I get sick and go into a nursing home, the nursing home's gonna take my house. What do I do? Mm-hmm. An irrevocable trust is an option that's pretty common. And it works for most people, where basically you transfer your home into the irrevocable trust. You still live in the house. No one can kick you out. You still, unfortunately, have to pay all the taxes and the utilities. That doesn't change. You do still get all the same property tax exemptions. So if you're getting the STAR exemption or the VETS exemption or whatever on your property taxes, putting it into an irrevocable trust, if the trust is designed properly, does not interfere with that, right? So nothing changes other than instead of John Doe owning the house, it's the John Doe Irrevocable Trust owning the house. And if that house is sold and another house, maybe John Doe wants to downsize, the trust can actually sell house A and buy house B without restarting that 5-year clock I mentioned. So the reason I said earlier, pretend John is like age 64, 68 in relatively good health, that's an important fact because there is a 5-year time horizon. Generally, this type of planning with an irrevocable trust, you don't do it 3 months before you might need nursing home care or when you're 93 years old and poor health. You do it when you're at an age where you think 5 years is a reasonable time frame where you'll be healthy and living independent. You wouldn't need to go into a nursing home. And none of us have a crystal ball. So what's the right time? What I tell people is 85, 90 is too old. 45 or 50 is too young. In between, obviously, is a pretty broad range. It depends on your health. It depends on your assets. It depends on your appetite for these things. Some people, you say the word trust and they just don't want to do it. They don't like it. I view my job as an educator. Teach people, help them understand the pros and the cons. I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. I certainly have recommendations, and I certainly, when I understand their situation, I try to guide them in the right path. But at the end of the day, it has to be something they're comfortable with after they've understood the pros and the cons. And the irrevocable trust, all the variables, health, age, family situation, assets, dictates whether or not that's the right move.
Okay, great. That's a lot to digest.
Yes, heavy.
I won't throw
stuff.
any what ifs for it, or
Sure.
I won't throw any what ifs at you for that one.
Sure.
I do want to talk to you about, we could talk about any of these topics for hours at end. So just to keep us moving here, another thing that me as a financial advisor runs into a lot is people that don't have an obvious next of kin, or maybe they're 60 something years old, they never had kids themselves, they're married or not married, doesn't really matter. And they're talking about, where do I want to leave my assets to? And it's a hard conversation. And I think a lot of people get to the part where they're filling out the beneficiary on something and they freeze up. They don't have that obvious person to put down. So the conversation usually turns to, first of all, is there any family? Is there a niece or nephew or somebody like that we want to leave money to? Is there a close friend? Or ultimately, is there a charity or some kind of foundation that you want to try to support? And I know that there's a lot of things that you as an attorney can do to facilitate that conversation.
Sure.
So where do you see a lot of these? Again, we'll say, I'm 65 years old, I don't have any kids, I'm not married. Where am I leaving my assets to?
Sure. I think you identified the key talking points.
I didn't miss any.
And family, friends, charity. I've had clients, I'm sure you've had too, who say, you seem like a great guy, Alex. Can you take it? So that's a little bit of a conflict.
Yeah, we can't do that.
Yeah. Those are the key points. Fleshing out who's going to be in charge of it's important, like executor. That's the person in your will that's in charge when you pass away of carrying out what your will says and collecting information, paying bills, filing tax returns. Identifying that person's huge. And that can be very challenging for people too. I think really looking at the financial relationships that the person has, perhaps the banking relationships that the person has. There are some banks and financial institutions that will be the executor if the circumstances are right, and it's not the right answer for everybody. If the person's charitably inclined, there's all kinds of things that can be done while they're still alive if they want to start that giving process while they're alive, and then maybe get a comfort level with it, to ease them into the idea that when I pass, this system is going to continue. Donor advised funds, things. You can start your own charitable foundation. Most people don't want that extra administrative hassle,
Sure.
But you can. And I do have clients who do that. There's also local resources, the Rochester Area Community Foundation. You want to start your own charitable fund, but you don't want all the paperwork that goes with it and tax filings and all that. You just want to set it up as a place where you can park assets for charitable benefit, charitable purposes. Rochester Area Community Foundation is great, and they're good at that. And yes, they charge fees for their work, but in my opinion, it's well worth it to have things streamlined. There's a whole host of ideas and alternatives out there, but really the client has to think long and hard, and I try to engage them to think about family, like what you're describing. Doesn't have to be family, friends. And you never want to scare people, but helping them understand the alternative if they do nothing is important, because to our earlier point, if you pass away in New York State without a will, New York makes a will for you. And if you're the kind of person that's, I do have a niece and nephew, but I don't talk to them and they're not in my life, unfortunately. And my closest people are my neighbors or my friends who are not blood relatives of mine. If you pass away without a will, the niece and nephew may be the ones inherit. They likely will be the ones inheriting, and your friends and neighbors will not. So you want to take control of what's going to happen. You don't want New York State dictating that for you.
Right. It makes me think of, have you ever seen the movie Mr. Deeds?
Oh,
Adam
yes.
Sandler movie.
Longfellow Deeds.
Yeah, Longfellow Deeds. I think that's
Yes.
everyone's, when we have these conversations, I always think about the long lost uncle you never even knew existed, passes away, and now you're a millionaire.
Yes.
You got to think about it in reverse. If you're that millionaire uncle, or even just not a millionaire, but a person that worked hard and earned some money, and you pass away, do you want your money going to the Adam Sandler character, or do you want them going to somebody that you care about?
Yeah.
No offense to Adam Sandler, if he's listening to this.
Yeah,
as he
I'm sure
often
he's
does.
watching. You've got a pretty big viewership.
Yes, I think Adam Sandler's probably listening right now. So
Yeah.
cool.
If he needs estate planner or financial advice, you got two pretty good guys here.
He can't afford us. Let's calm down.
That's fair.
Anyway, I think we're even at the end of our time here. Is there anything else that we want to make sure we cover before we cut it off?
No, I appreciate you having me on. Like I said earlier, I'm part of Woods Oviatt Gilman. We're a great firm in town. We have estate planning, but not just estate planning. We pretty much do everything. Full service firm, happy to help in any way I can. And the community in Rochester, we're lucky. Great community, great people, close-knit community. And in Woods Oviatt's been around for a long time. The name's probably familiar to a lot of people, and happy to help anyone with their legal questions.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. And one last plug before we go. We're talking before we start recording.
Yes.
You've got a podcast coming out soon. Can you tell the people about that? Or is it a secret?
No, it's not a secret. It's
always
not a
edit this out.
secret. It's probably coming soon into the Woods Oviatt Gilman.
Love it.
Not to be confused with the musical Into the Woods.
Okay. I was confused, but now you've cleared that up.
Not affiliated at all. We'll be coming out soon, and we'll be covering topics like this: estate planning, long-term care planning, If mom is in the hospital and needs long-term care, what's next? Soup to nuts kind of thing, explaining to people what they should be thinking about and talking about. And we try to do it in a kind of like this, a conversational, down-to-earth manner that people can digest.
Cool. Love it. I'll
yeah.
be looking out for Into the Woods.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here. This has
Thanks,
been the
Alex.
Roadmap to Retirement podcast, and we'll end it there.
Thank you.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.